You've probably heard the stories, right? A patch of the Atlantic Ocean where ships, planes, and people just disappear, vanish without a trace. It is, without a doubt, one of the world's most enduring mysteries. So today, we're going to dive deep into the legend of the Bermuda Triangle.
I mean, that sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, doesn't it? But it's not. This is exactly how sailors and pilots have described this bizarre region for centuries. They've passed down these tales of a place that just seems to defy all the normal rules of the world.
All right, so an ocean of secrets. Before we jump into all the spooky disappearances, let's just set the stage. Let's figure out what we're even talking about, because on the surface, it's just a vast and kind of ordinary patch of ocean.
So if you pull up a map, you'll see it right there. A big triangle of the Atlantic Ocean between Bermuda, Miami, and Puerto Rico. And you know what? There's nothing special about it. No weird markings, no here be dragons. It's just open water. But its history? Well, that's a whole different story. A history just packed with strange, unsolved events that suggest something very, very weird is going on just beneath the surface.
And this whole thing is not a modern invention. I mean, we're not talking about some internet creepypasta here. The very first recorded weirdness goes all the way back to Christopher Columbus. Yeah, that Columbus. He wrote in his logbook that his compass was going haywire and he saw these strange lights in the sky. And for centuries after that, sailors have been telling basically the exact same story.
Okay, let's move on. Vanished into silence. So we've got centuries of strange reports, right? But now we're going to get into the really terrifying cases, the ones that truly cemented the triangle's legend in the 20th century. These are the stories of the people who flew or sailed into this patch of ocean and just never came out.
So picture this, December 5th, 1945. You've got 5 military aircraft on what's supposed to be a totally routine training flight. The weather's good, the pilots are pros, everything is just normal. This is the story of Flight 19, and it's probably the most famous, most chilling disappearance of them all.
But then, not long into the flight, the control tower gets this message from the flight leader. "I've lost my position. I don't even know where the sun is." Can you imagine hearing that? It's the first real sign of panic, a total loss of where they are. They were completely lost, and they had absolutely no idea why.
And then this comes through. The compasses aren't working. Everything is going wrong. This right here is the heart of the mystery. We're not talking about one faulty instrument. We're talking about a complete catastrophic breakdown of their technology. Their main compasses, their backup compasses, everything was failing. They were essentially flying blind.
And this was one of the last things they ever heard from Flight 19. The sea has turned white. I mean, what does that even mean? A weird weather event? Some kind of mass hallucination? We just don't know. And after that, nothing. Just silence.
But the tragedy, believe it or not, wasn't over. A rescue plane, a Martin Mariner, was sent out to find them. It had a crew of 13, and that plane also vanished, gone, which brought the total number of people lost that day to 27.
And look, Flight 19 was not a one-off thing. Not even close. When you start digging, you see this really disturbing pattern. You have the SS Cotopaxi in 1925. Its last message was, "The sky has disappeared." Then there's the Connemara IV in 55, found totally empty, just drifting, with warm coffee still sitting on a table, but no crew. And then the Marine Sulphur Queen, this huge tanker, just poof, gone. No distress signal, nothing. These aren't just accidents, you know? They're total enigmas.
All right, so the scientific search. Now, with all these bizarre, unexplained stories piling up, you know the scientific community had to step in. They couldn't just ignore it. So investigators started digging, looking for logical, rational, physical explanations for what in the world could be going on here.
Okay, so what did they come up with? Well, there are a few leading theories. You've got magnetic anomalies, basically natural quirks in the Earth's magnetic field that could totally mess with a compass. Makes sense. Then there are rogue weather events, like these sudden, super violent storms that could just swallow a ship whole. Another big one is methane gas eruptions from the seabed. And of course, you always have to consider plain old human error. But does that really explain everything? Does it explain the sea turning white or the sky disappearing? I'm not so sure.
So let's zoom in on one of the most fascinating scientific theories, this idea of methane hydrates. Okay, so just imagine this.
All over the ocean floor, you have these huge deposits of methane gas that are frozen solid, kind of like ice. They're totally stable down there. But if something changes, say the pressure or the temperature, and that ice suddenly thaws, well, the result could be absolutely catastrophic.
And here's how it would work. You get a sudden eruption of this gas from the seabed. This massive bubble comes rushing to the surface. As it does, it basically turns the water into a fizzy, frothy mess, kind of like when you open a can of soda that's been shaken up. Now, for a ship floating up top, that's a disaster. The water suddenly loses all its density. The ship loses buoyancy and just sinks. Sinks like a stone almost instantly. There'd be no time for an SOS, which might explain why so many of these vessels disappear without a trace.
Now we get to the tales of the survivors. Because here's the thing. Not everyone who had a weird encounter in the Triangle disappeared. Some people made it out. And let me tell you, their stories are just as baffling as the ones who vanished.
And what's so wild is that a lot of them describe the same things. Things like the sky suddenly turned green, or it felt like we hit an invisible wall. Even the sea looked like it was breathing. I mean, these are not your typical sailor stories about a bad storm. This is something else entirely. But maybe the weirdest thing of all is this time distortion phenomenon. You have pilots who say they flew through a strange fog or some kind of tunnel of light. To them, it felt like maybe 3 minutes had passed. But when they landed, they found out they'd actually been gone for 3 hours. How do you even begin to explain that? It's something that just seems to defy our basic understanding of physics.
Which brings us to the unsolved enigma. So where does all this leave us, really? On one hand, you've got some really solid scientific theories that could explain a lot. But on the other hand, you've got these incredible eyewitness accounts and disappearances that just don't seem to fit into any of those neat little boxes. The mystery, well, it absolutely endures.
So what is the Bermuda Triangle then? Is it just a geographical spot where a bunch of natural, explainable things, magnetic quirks, crazy weather, gas eruptions, all happen to come together in a kind of perfect storm? Or is it something else? Something that our science just doesn't have an answer for yet?
After all these decades of searching, we really don't have many solid answers. We just know that somewhere down there, on the floor of the Atlantic, lie dozens of aircraft and hundreds of ships. Their final moments are a complete mystery. And that leaves us with one final, haunting question. Does the truth of what happened here still wait for us